They thought they could force me out of my own land, push me off the soil I had bled and sweat to build. My name is Ethan Morgan, and it all started with a thick letter with the HOA Golden Meadows logo on it. They wanted to build a gate, block the only road leading to my ranch, called it security, but the truth, they wanted me gone. And when I protested, Maxwell Bennett, the HOA president, just smirked. You can still use the road for $300 a year with a pass. That's when I saw it. Not just a gate, but a trap, a scheme carefully designed to force me to sell my land. They wanted me to pay to enter my own home? Fine, but I was going to make them pay 10 times over, because they forgot one thing. This is Texas, and I'm Ethan Morgan. Ethan Morgan never wanted trouble. All he ever wanted was a place of his own, a place where the wind whispered through the tall grasses, where the morning sun painted the fields gold, and where the only sound was the quiet rustle of leaves beneath a wide Texas sky. For years, Ethan had worked in the city. Long hours, endless meetings, the constant hum of traffic and neon lights. It paid the bills, sure, but it drained his soul. He was a man who lived by his hands, who found joy in building and fixing. But in the city, there was nothing real to touch, nothing true to hold. So one spring morning, he decided he'd had enough. He cashed out his savings, packed up his old truck, and drove south until the city's noise faded into the quiet hum of open fields. That's when he found it, 30 acres of rugged, untamed land just outside Austin. An old ranch house with peeling paint, a barn that leaned like an old man against the wind, and fields overrun with weeds. To anyone else, it was a forgotten patch of wilderness. But to Ethan, it was a promise, a chance to start over. Here, he didn't just see land, he saw freedom. And with his own two hands, he transformed it. Weekends and late nights became a sanctuary. He rewired the crumbling house, replaced rusty pipes, built an irrigation system that danced with the rain. Every nail he drove, every beam he lifted, was a reminder that this was his place, built by his sweat, shaped by his will. But the land wasn't just for him. People from the nearby towns started to visit. Some came for fresh eggs and crisp vegetables, drawn by the scent of his thriving garden. Others came just to stand on his porch, sip coffee, and breathe the clean air. Frank and Eleanor Hamilton were more than just neighbors. They were family without the bloodline. Frank, with his silver hair and weathered hands, always seemed to show up whenever something needed fixing. And Eleanor, her blueberry pies weren't just dessert. They were medicine for the soul. For Ethan, this wasn't just a ranch. It was a refuge, a place where laughter echoed across the fields, where children chased fireflies at dusk, and where the worries of the world seemed to fade like mist under the morning sun. But peace is a fragile thing. Every morning, when the sun painted the fields gold and the breeze whispered through the wildflowers, Ethan felt a quiet pride swelling in his chest. This was his world, carved from raw earth, one nail, one seed, one sunrise at a time. And he thought nothing could ever take it away from him. But he was wrong, because peace can be built with calloused hands and honest work, and destroyed with a single stroke of a pen. Ethan didn't know it yet, but his quiet world was about to become a battleground. Ethan Morgan's mornings usually began with sunlight spilling over his fields and the quiet hum of nature. But today it began with a chill, a thick official letter bearing the seal of HOA Golden Meadows, stark and oppressive. Ethan tore it open, his rough, calloused fingers leaving faint smudges on the pristine paper. A mandatory meeting. Words like community enhancement and safety improvements danced across the page in polished language. But Ethan saw through the gloss. He'd been around long enough to know that when people started talking about improvements, they usually meant someone else had to pay for them. When he arrived at the community center that evening, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Rows of neat metal chairs lined the room, filled with residents who smelled of fresh perfume and polished leather. A quiet murmur filled the space, gentle laughter, whispered gossip, but it all seemed to die when Ethan walked in. His mud-stained boots clicked against the pristine tiles. No one made room for him. No one met his eyes. At the front, a tall man stood beneath the harsh, fluorescent lights, silver hair perfectly combed, his smile a mask of charm and control. Maxwell Bennett, HOA president, a man whose voice was smoother than the silk tie he wore. Ladies and gentlemen, Maxwell began, spreading his arms like a preacher, as part of our ongoing efforts to maintain safety and enhance property values, we are introducing a new security measure, the Golden Meadows Gate System. A click, and behind him, an image appeared. A towering gate, sleek and modern, complete with cameras and stone columns. A fortress. This will ensure that only residents and their guests have access to our roads, maintaining the peace and exclusivity we all cherish. Ethan's jaw tightened. That was his road, the only road to his ranch, his home. He stood, his voice cutting through the polished air. Wait, that's the only road leading to my property. I have a legal easement, a right of access recorded since 1972. Maxwell's gaze slid over to him, the smile still plastered on his face but his eyes darkening. Mr. Morgan, while you may have enjoyed informal access in the past, the HOA now manages all road-related decisions. But don't worry, you can maintain your access with a resident pass, just $300 annually. Silence swept through the room. Ethan felt the weight of it pressing down, the subtle judgment of those around him. People who saw him not as a neighbor, but as an inconvenience. $300? To use the road I've always had the right to use? Ethan's voice rose, anger bleeding through his calm. That's not security, that's extortion. A few residents shifted, avoiding his gaze. Most remained silent, eyes fixed on the polished floor. Maxwell's smile widened, a predator's grin. Security isn't free, Mr. Morgan. After all, we can't have just anyone wandering through our pristine community, can we? Ethan's hands clenched, his voice steady but low. You can't just take away my access. It's my right. Rights? Maxwell chuckled, his voice a whisper wrapped in silk. Of course, you have your rights, as long as you're willing to pay for them. Ethan stared at him, feeling the world closing in. This wasn't just a gate, it was a trap. But Ethan wasn't the type to walk away. He took a slow breath, his voice calm but sharp as a knife. I'm not going anywhere, and you can take that $300 and shove it right back into your security system. Maxwell's smile never faltered, but his eyes hardened. Have it your way, Mr. Morgan. But remember, this is just the beginning. Roads have a way of closing, and sometimes so do doors. Ethan turned, walking out of the room, the whispers swelling behind him like a rising tide. But he didn't need to hear them. He knew what was coming. And somewhere beyond the quiet fields of his ranch, a storm was beginning to gather. Ethan Morgan had never thought of himself as a man who needed the law. On his ranch, things were simple: plant, nurture, harvest. But as he stared at the iron gate rising against the morning sky, cold and unyielding, he knew that simplicity was over. The day after that cursed HOA meeting, Ethan drove straight to the county office. His boots left trails of dry mud on the polished floor, and the clerk behind the counter raised an eyebrow. But Ethan didn't care. He needed answers. Easement, he demanded, the words sharp as a blade. I need a record of my easement, right of access to my land. The clerk sighed, scrolling through the database with a bored expression, but after a few clicks, her eyes widened. Here it is. Filed in 1972. Permanent access guaranteed to your property. Ethan's heart pounded with relief. I need a certified copy. Minutes later, with the document in hand, Ethan felt a spark of hope, but that hope was a flicker in a gathering storm. He drove to Olivia's office next, an old friend from college who had traded late-night study sessions for a career in law. Olivia's eyes scanned the document, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. It's solid, Ethan, no question. But they know that. What do you mean? They don't want to win a legal battle. They want to outlast you, wear you down, make you give up. Her voice softened. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about pressure. Pressure. The word echoed in his mind as he drove home. But pressure turned to anger when he saw them. Construction workers, yellow helmets bobbing, machines roaring. They were digging holes, pouring concrete, laying the steel skeleton of a gate. He pulled over, his truck skidding on the gravel. "Hey," he shouted, boots pounding against the dirt. "Who gave you permission to build here?" One of the workers glanced up, shrugged. "Talk to the HOA, sir. We're just following orders." Ethan's fist clenched. And then he saw him, Maxwell Bennett, stepping out of a sleek black SUV, a smug smile spreading across his face. "This is happening, Mr. Morgan," Maxwell called out, hands in his pockets, voice dripping with false sympathy. "I suggest you adapt instead of resisting. It's easier." "Easier?" Ethan's voice was sharp, his pulse pounding in his ears. "You're blocking the only road to my home." Maxwell's smile widened, like a predator savoring its prey. "Not blocking, securing, and since you seem so fond of your rights, you're welcome to challenge it. But I assure you, you'll find it quite costly." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, a storm of rage churning inside him. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Rain drummed against the tin roof of his ranch house, but his mind was louder. He replayed every smug word Maxwell had thrown at him. Pressure, give up, costly. But Ethan wasn't the kind to give up. Sometime after midnight, driven by a restless fury, he grabbed a flashlight and marched out to the new gate. The cold rain soaked through his flannel shirt, but he didn't care. He followed the line of the metal fence, each step feeding his anger, until he saw it. The post, the concrete base of the gate, 3 feet onto his property. A small mistake, but a powerful one. A bitter smile twisted his lips. "They think they can push me out? They just pushed too far." Ethan Morgan didn't sleep that night. Rain hammered against the tin roof of his ranch house. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the fury boiling inside him. He wasn't just angry. He was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. They weren't just taking his road. They were taking his freedom. Everything he had built with his own hands. But as the rain drummed against the window, another thought flickered to life. A tiny ember in the darkness. That gate. It wasn't just a wall. It was a mistake. By morning, his exhaustion had turned to focus. He grabbed his phone and dialed the one person he trusted. Ryan Cooper, his old friend and a local contractor. "Ethan? Man, it's 6 in the morning. What's going on? I need your help. Bring your tools. I've got a job for you." Ryan's truck pulled up an hour later, headlights slicing through the mist. Ethan met him at the gate, rain still trickling from the soaked fields. "That's my property line," Ethan pointed. "And that post? It's 3 feet over it." Ryan's eyebrows shot up. He pulled out a measuring tape, then grinned. "They screwed up." "They didn't just screw up." Ethan's voice was cold. "They handed me a weapon." The plan came together fast. Ryan called in 2 of his best men. No questions, just hard work. They worked through the night, headlights cutting the mist, sparks flying from welding rods, rain soaking their clothes. By dawn, the toll booth stood like a silent sentinel beside the towering iron gate. Ethan set up solar panels, a motion-activated camera, and a speaker that greeted each car with a firm message. "Private road, toll $20 per crossing, monthly pass available." The first car arrived before sunrise, a silver SUV. The driver stared, confused. What is this?" "Private road, ma'am. $20 per crossing. Cash or card." But this is the HOA's road." "No, ma'am." Ethan smiled. "This is my land. That gate is on my property. If they want to use it, they'll pay just like I would have." Some drivers cursed, some backed away, but most paid. $20 here, $20 there. It added up fast. By noon, the news spread. Patricia Lawson, the HOA manager, stormed up in her luxury sedan, sunglasses hiding her furious glare. "This is madness, Ethan," she snapped. "No." Ethan's voice was calm, steel beneath the surface. "This is business. Since the HOA thinks it can charge me, I'm just returning the favor." "Take it down or we'll sue you," she spat. Ethan shrugged. "Feel free, but as long as that gate is on my land, it stays." An hour later, Maxwell Bennett arrived, his polished shoes splashing mud. "Morgan, this is a pathetic stunt. I'll bury you in lawsuits." "Go ahead." Ethan didn't flinch. "But until then, I'll be making money." The sheriff showed up soon after, called by the furious HOA board. Officer Ramirez looked over the survey, then smiled. As far as I can see, Mr. Morgan's on his own land. If you have a boundary dispute, take it to court. Maxwell's face twisted, fury burning behind his fake smile. You won't get away with this. Ethan leaned closer, his voice a quiet thunder. I already have. By sunset, a line of headlights stretched down the road, each car stopping, each driver paying. And Ethan sat on his porch, a cold beer in his hand, a quiet smile on his lips. They thought they could fence him out, but they'd only built a gate to his victory. Ethan's toll booth wasn't just a barrier, it was a declaration, a silent, unyielding statement that he would not be bullied. But Maxwell Bennett wasn't the kind to lose quietly. At first it was whispers, rumors spreading through Golden Meadows. Homeowners grumbled about traffic. HOA meetings buzzed with outrage. It's extortion, they cried, a disgrace to our community. But the residents who grumbled were the same ones who gripped their steering wheels in silent fury. And paid. Maxwell tried the legal route first. Cease and desist letters filled Ethan's mailbox, each one thicker than the last, full of legal jargon meant to intimidate. But Ethan wasn't alone. Olivia, his old friend turned lawyer, stood by him. Mr. Morgan's toll booth is fully within his legal rights, as the gate is trespassing on his land. But Maxwell didn't just want to win, he wanted to destroy. Late at night, Ethan's phone rang. No caller ID. A voice whispered, low and venomous. Take it down, Morgan, or you'll regret it. He hung up, but the silence that followed was louder. For a brief moment, Ethan felt the weight of it all. Alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the quiet of his ranch, he stared at the stack of legal threats. They wanted him to break. They wanted him to surrender. And for a moment, he almost did. But that moment passed. When Patricia Lawson, the HOA manager, showed up again, this time pretending to negotiate, Ethan saw through the false sweetness. We can restore your access for a reduced fee, she cooed. My access? Ethan leaned against his toll booth, a cold smile curling his lips. I already have access. I just decided to share it. For a price. Her fake smile shattered. This is a circus. You're embarrassing the entire community. I'm not the one who built a gate on someone else's land. Her face twisted. She stormed off, her heels clicking like a ticking clock. But the real fight began that night. Ethan's phone buzzed just after midnight, his security camera alert. He rubbed his eyes, but sleep vanished the moment he saw the footage. 3 figures in dark hoodies crept toward the booth. One sprayed black paint across the camera lens. Another yanked at the payment terminal, ripping it free. And the third, a tall, broad-shouldered figure, kicked the barrier arm until it snapped. They laughed like jackals in the night. But they didn't know about the second camera, hidden in the trees. And as Ethan watched, his blood ran cold. Maxwell Bennett. Even with the hood, that face was unmistakable. By morning, Ethan had sent the footage to Olivia and Sheriff Ramirez. But he didn't stop there. He posted the video online. No dramatic titles, just the truth. HOA president caught vandalizing toll booth. The internet erupted. Thousands watched, commented, shared. Local news picked up the story. Maxwell's polished reputation cracked like glass. This is a misunderstanding, he insisted at a hastily arranged press conference. A smear campaign against me. But even as he spoke, his voice trembled. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the world watched his lie crumble. A week later, George, an unassuming HOA resident, knocked on Ethan's door, his face pale. I didn't know what they were planning, Ethan, but you deserve to see this. George handed him a USB drive. Ethan plugged it into his laptop, his breath catching. Emails, dozens of them, between Maxwell and the HOA board. A plan to block Ethan's road, force him to sell, take his land for pennies. Once Morgan is cut off, he'll have no choice but to sell. He's a stubborn old fool, but everyone breaks eventually. Maxwell's own words, printed in cold black text. Ethan's hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. They want to break me? His voice was a whisper, but his eyes burned like embers. Maxwell thinks he can take what I built? Ethan leaned back, a slow, determined smile curling on his lips. They have no idea who they're dealing with. Ethan stared at the screen, Maxwell's smug words burning in his mind. Once Morgan is cut off, he'll have no choice but to sell. He's a stubborn old fool, but everyone breaks eventually. Everyone breaks. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers wrapped around his phone, dialing Olivia's number before he even realized it. Olivia, it's time to end this. Within hours, they had a plan. But Ethan knew this wasn't just about legal paperwork anymore. It was about truth, about exposing the rot beneath the polished surface of Golden Meadows. The next morning, Olivia and Ethan met with Sheriff Ramirez. The sheriff's face darkened as he read the emails, saw the footage. This isn't just vandalism, it's conspiracy, fraud. But Ethan didn't want it to end with a quiet investigation. He wanted it all out in the open. He wanted everyone to see who Maxwell Bennett really was. Zoe Sullivan, the young reporter who had covered Ethan's story, answered on the first ring. Ethan? I was hoping you'd call. Is it true you have new evidence? I have everything, Ethan replied, his voice steady, and I want the world to see it. Zoe's news team arrived that afternoon. Cameras rolled as Ethan stood by his toll booth, the wind tugging at his jacket, his voice calm but unyielding. He held up the USB drive. This is the truth they tried to bury. Emails proving that the HOA wanted to force me off my land. They lied. They vandalized. They thought I would break. They were wrong. The footage aired that evening, and the internet exploded again. The hashtags number Texas Toll Booth Justice and number HOA Gate trended for days. But this time, it wasn't just local. National news stations picked up the story. Maxwell Bennett's name became synonymous with greed and corruption. Golden Meadows was in chaos. Residents who once whispered behind Ethan's back now marched into HOA meetings, demanding answers. Maxwell tried to defend himself, his voice cracking under pressure. These are lies, fabrications. But the room was against him. Frank, Ethan's old friend, stood up. Lies. We've seen the footage, Maxwell. We've seen the emails. You tried to rob a man of his land. We trusted you and you sold us out. A chorus of angry voices followed. Patricia tried to calm them, but her voice was drowned out. A vote was called and Maxwell was removed from his position. His allies fell away like leaves in the wind. Even his lawyer abandoned him, desperate to distance himself from the scandal. But Ethan wasn't done. He filed charges for vandalism, fraud, and harassment. Maxwell's polished life shattered. Lawsuits piled up. His savings bled dry in legal fees. The man who once stood above everyone else now found himself alone, a pariah in the very community he once controlled. 2 weeks later, the gate that once blocked Ethan's road was torn down. The steel frame twisted and rusted, hauled away in pieces. But Ethan didn't just leave the space empty. He built something new, an archway of climbing jasmine, green vines and white flowers spilling down like nature's triumph over steel. But his fight wasn't just about a gate. It was about freedom, about community. So Ethan took the money he had earned from his toll booth and started something new, a land rights defense fund, for people like him, for those threatened by those who thought power meant control. Frank and Eleanor were his first volunteers. Zoe covered the launch, her camera capturing a growing crowd of smiling faces. Kids from the town visited the ranch, learning to plant vegetables, gather eggs, and build simple machines. Ethan's land became more than a refuge. It became a place of learning, of hope. And Ethan? He stood beneath his jasmine arch, the sun setting over his fields, a quiet smile on his face. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, the soft clucking of hens, the laughter of children running through the grass. Ethan had fought not just for his land, but for his dignity, for his right to live freely. And in the end, he hadn't just won. He had built something greater, a place of peace, a place of truth. Because some people think they can take anything they want, but there are others who will fight for what is theirs. Ethan Morgan was one of those people, and now his story wasn't just his own. It was a lesson, a reminder that sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to back down. Ethan Morgan's story didn't just end with his victory. It became a symbol, a reminder that even when the powerful try to take what's yours, you can fight back. That even a single voice can become a roar when it speaks the truth. But what about you? Have you ever been pushed to the edge? Ever felt powerless against someone who thought they could take what was yours? Maybe it was a greedy landlord. Maybe it was a corporation that thought you were just another number. Or maybe it was someone who thought their title gave them the right to decide your fate. Ethan fought back. And so can you. Tell us your story in the comments. Who tried to take what was yours? How did you stand your ground? Or if you're still fighting, know this: you're not alone. If this story moved you, if it stirred something inside you, don't let it end here. Share it. Start a conversation. Remind people that justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to back down. And if you want to hear more stories of resilience, of ordinary people standing up against the odds, hit that subscribe button. Because these aren't just stories. They're echoes of real life. Because sometimes the strongest fences are the ones you take down together. Ethan Morgan's story isn't just about a man defending his ranch. It's a lesson in resilience and the power of truth. In life, there will always be those who try to force you to give up, believing that money or authority can control everything. But as Ethan proved, true strength doesn't come from status or power. It comes from the courage to stand up for what is rightfully yours. Never let fear silence you. Never let injustice push you into the shadows. Remember, justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it begins with an ordinary person daring to say, enough. And sometimes the best way to tear down a wall is to turn it into a doorway.